You're tuning into BDI Weekly, the official podcast of Best Doctors Insurance.
Este es el programa de Best Doctors Insurance.
Here, we discuss the best in health insurance.
Los temas más interesantes de salud médica.
Medical mysteries, diagnosis, and world topics.
Best Doctors Insurance. Em inovação e assistência médica.
Good morning, everyone. This is the official BDI podcast. And although we are in quarantine, we are ready to start a new episode. Aquí arrancamos con un episodio nuevo en el programa oficial de Best Doctors Insurance. And on the show today is Dr. Damaris Mafut, the owner and lead pediatric physician at Fit Life Pediatric Consultants in South Miami, Florida. La doctora trata muchos de los asegurados de nosotros. Thank you very much for being together, but apart on this particular episode.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
It's my pleasure, and it's our pleasure as well. We know you do a lot of good work with a lot of our members. And today we're going to discuss, of course, COVID-19. What else is there to discuss, right? But what is so important about this particular episode is that we're going to discuss how it affects children in particular. It's important for us to understand how children and even teenagers are being affected. Es importante entender cómo este virus está afectando a los jóvenes y a los niños en las familias. So if you have an opinion or a question, contact us at bestdoctorsinsurance.com. Tienes un comentario, contáctenos en la página de web. So, doctor, everybody's on this worldwide lockdown. It affects people many different ways, and we're going to dive into everything in heavy detail. But before that, so everyone could understand, how did you start your career as a pediatrician?
Well, Willie, I actually always wanted to work with children. I really enjoy their creativity, just the nature of a child that they're always happy. And so I always knew I wanted to work with children. And when I finally decided I wanted to be a physician, and this came from my father who wanted to be a physician and wasn't able to do it because of the way Cuba does their schooling process. And it started out for me to fulfill his dream. And then I realized this was actually my dream. And so once I chose medicine as a career, it was almost like a no-brainer that I would become a pediatrician. And I went into medical school, and most people go into medical school and they'll change their choice, their discipline of choice. And for me, it was always pediatrics, and I love what I do. I'm very passionate about helping children, any child really. And I, at the end of the day, really just wanted to be a voice for the kids, somebody who would advocate, who would stand up for them, whether they needed it or just needed an extra voice. And that's really how it all started for me. And it still is to this day.
And is there a specific age range for your practice?
We see here everybody from 0 to 21, actually. So actually a little bit beyond what we would consider, a child. But anything from 0 to 21. And I actually do see some special needs children. And so those children, even though in my heart they're children, they're actually young adults. So some of them may be into their 20s, reaching almost 30.
Right. And tell me more about your practice as far as, more of internal, specialties.
So in my practice, I set out about just 3.5 years ago. I broke off on my own because I really wanted to create a new face for pediatrics. I wanted a little bit of the old with a little bit of the new. And what I mean by that is that I wanted that old feel of, your pediatrician, you're not seeing 10 doctors, but you're actually seeing one doctor and you're getting to know them. And that doctor knows the family and our team actually knows our families very well. And so I felt very pressured in my other jobs by feeling that time restriction and requirement that medicine has become, where you have 10 minutes to see a patient. Wow. And so I something that I could actually say, you know what, if this patient needs 20 minutes of my time, I have the choice to give them 20 minutes. If this patient needs only 10, then I can only give 10, and that's fine too.
Right.
So I've been able to, by setting off on my own, create a culture and an environment here in my practice where everybody on my team works this way. We go above and beyond for our patients. We give them the time and the support that they need without shortchanging them. But at the same time, we're still running a business, and, everybody lives happy. So for me, it's a nice mix of the two worlds. And I think this is how probably medicine was, probably 20, 30 years ago. And I would like to see it come back to that. Obviously, there's always going to be some advances that have to stay in place, of course. But I really enjoy that personal touch and getting to know my families and knowing that, when little Johnny comes into my office, I still remember what I discussed with Johnny and his parents 4 visits ago. And so that's what I've tried to create here.
Yeah, so it's like more quality of care, and Absolutely. It's also more, and then it's more rewarding for you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. What we're all about.
Because it's more about the patients than it is of business, and really like in the larger sense,
Agreed. If you don't form that teamwork approach and the families don't feel comfortable and the parents don't trust and feel comfortable, you're really never going to be able to help those children the way you ultimately want them to. And right. You actually see that in action here.
And then, and obviously right now, I imagine that you received a lot of different phone calls, emails, and really just a lot of concern.
Absolutely. We're constantly getting emails. We're constantly getting phone calls, simply just asking, what do we do next? How do I see you? Are you open? What do I do for my child if they're missing vaccines? Basic questions you would think, not just necessarily about COVID, but it seems like everything has just come to an abrupt stop. And so that has actually increased, I think, the anxiety and the panic in everybody, because now it's, okay, I can't leave my home, but what if? What happens if this situation, can I leave my home? And what are the moments that are relatively okay for me to leave my home? And what are the measures I have to do in order to safely leave my home and get to that next point, whether it be your doctor's office or grocery shopping, right? So right. We're getting a lot of those questions, parents with concerns about finding formula for their children, for their infants, just even basic needs in terms of supplies. We're getting questions on.
And based on that, what can parents do to support their kids more so with the quarantine part of it? What can parents actually do to ease their anxieties and their concerns?
That's a great question, Willie. And it's actually come up quite a bit in discussion here in my office with some of the parents that have come in, because believe it or not, children get affected by all of these situations. We always think of kids as, they have no worries, they don't know what's going on. But, lock a child up in a home, break their routine for a week, and maybe they won't figure it out. But we're going on 4 weeks plus. And by now the kids are asking, what's going on? When are we going back? Am I going to see my friends again, or maybe a family member? And so now they're starting to ask questions. They're starting to, get concerned. They're starting to have or show behavior problems. And the parents may not understand what's going on. They may think it's kind of like cabin fever. Everybody's getting cabin fever because everybody's ready to go back into normal life. But children have different ways of expressing anxiety and depression and frustration. And we would think that, like us, many of them maybe get isolated, or they get quiet, or maybe they want to cry. And you'd be surprised that there are certain age groups that will actually completely do the opposite. And so knowing your child and the age group that they're in is very important for any parent. And what I mean by knowing your child is knowing really who your child is in terms of, are they more of an emotional person or are they more of an aggressive person? And if you know what kind of personality they are, then you know how to come at them in terms of support. And so here you're talking about kids who are acting out, who are yelling, who are having tantrums over the smallest little thing, and that's them showing you that they're frustrated. So what do parents have to do? Parents have to become a little bit more compassionate about that, actually give them their space to release their emotions, but then talk to them and actually ask them, what are you afraid of? What do you think? Are you missing your friends? Well, maybe we could do a little video chat with your friend. And, it's just ways of bridging the communication gap that we have right now and the social gap that we have right now while waiting this out, right? So, it's a difficult time for everybody, but it's trying to become a little bit more innovative and thinking outside the box for the sake of the kids.
So basically, the behaviors to be aware of is more like acting out, lashing out, bouts of temper tantrums.
Right. It could be inconsolable crying. These are usually more in the younger kids that we'll see that. When you're talking about your preteen and teenagers, then that's when you're probably going to see more of your isolation, more of your depressed mood. You may actually see even defiance, right? So teenagers can go either way, and they can actually then all of a sudden, scream and leave the house against parents' rules, right? So they'll get defiant. They'll maybe all of a sudden start to talk back and get, loud and disrespectful. And a lot of this at the end of the day stems from just misplaced anger, misplaced frustration. We're all feeling it. And if we can't identify that within ourselves or within our children, it's going to be that much harder to actually help them. So the first thing I would say is, if you're seeing these behaviors, try to sit them down and just talk to them. What's frustrating you? Are you scared about this situation? And let them honestly tell you what they feel, but listen to them. Actually listen to what they have to say. If you don't, and if you don't feel confident that you know how to handle that, then that's when you would want to call your PCP or your pediatrician and maybe get a little bit of a little extra help there in terms of what to say, or, maybe even setting up a meeting for the child and the pediatrician, whether it's in person or telemedicine.
Yeah, I think that listening is a key. I think oftentimes as parents, we tune out because we have a lot of stuff on our own plates, and then we sort of forget that, like you said, that they have their own perception of the world. They have their own perception of this situation and other situations.
Absolutely.
So I think that listening is very important. Now, there's a new trend, right? That they basically lick surfaces and objects, right? As like a dare, sort of like daring somebody. Young people, are important to the future, but they make a lot of silly mistakes, and this is no different. So, what do you think? About that challenge and situations like that?
Well, I completely agree with you, Willie. You pretty much used a term that I'm going to use right now, because that's exactly what it is. It's high-risk behavior. It's irresponsible behavior, because they're putting not only their own health at risk, but they're putting the risk. They're putting their community at risk, right? Because we don't know what they have. They don't know what's been on that surface, and they're ingesting all these bacteria, all these viruses. So forget the COVID. Aside from the COVID, what else are they, ingesting? And so what happens, I think, in this particular day and age with social media, it's and with teenagers is attention has become a big component of being a teenager. I mean, if you think back when you were a teenager, what did you care most about? What your friends thought? You know, everybody wants to be liked. Everybody wants to be popular. So attention is a big thing in this time period, if you will.
Right.
Now you have the advent of the internet, social media, YouTube, which are great tools if you use them wisely and you use them appropriately. But unfortunately, many of these adolescents and young teenagers are doing it just to get more attention from their friends, more likes, more exposure. And so they feel that the crazier and the wilder things that they do, the more they're going to get popular.
Right.
Not accepting that, well, you may get that, but at what cost and at what risk?
What cost? Yeah.
Exactly. And so until you are faced with that reality of a major health issue at that age, you think you're invincible, right? We all think we're invincible. And so I think you're seeing that dynamic of nothing can touch me, I'm invincible, and I want attention and I want to be the best at whatever. And so you're seeing this kind of play out in all of these kids on the internet making poor choices, like licking a surface that God knows how many people have touched, putting themselves at risk for illnesses that they would not want if they really did develop them.
No, and then it's also awareness. You know, parents have to just try and be more aware. You know what I mean? Like what's going on. You know what I mean? Like you have to have visibility over your children. Absolutely. Whether online, on the phone. I mean, it's important to know like what your kids are up to.
Absolutely.
And I think parents that are vigilant may not encounter these type of crazy challenge things. And, we do have to take a break. So ya regresamos. This is the official BDI podcast, Quarantine, but we're still going forward. We're doing it. Estamos con el episodio. Estamos en cuarentena, pero vamos a seguir. So, Willie Bermudez, we will be back with you in a moment.
You are tuning into BDI Weekly, the official podcast of Best Doctors Insurance.
Este es el programa de Best Doctors Insurance.
Here, we discuss the best in health insurance,
Los temas más interesantes de salud médica.
medical mysteries, diagnosis, and world topics.
Best Doctors Insurance, a inovação e assistência médica.
Willie Bermudez back with you. Aquí seguimos, and we are discussing the COVID-19 virus as it pertains to children, specifically adolescents and children. It's important to understand how they're being affected, how they're thinking, and how they're feeling, and what to do about it. So, doctor, how can parents best support teenagers? Let's mention teenagers for a second. How can they best support the teenagers during the isolation, but more so, aside from talking with them? Should they change their own behaviors at home, the parents? Meaning, should they make it a point to spend more time with the child and ask them what you're doing periodically throughout the day? Or should they just play like business as usual?
That's a great question, Willie. I actually think that teenagers are difficult in general because it's, they really don't want to talk to us in terms of their parents. They feel that we don't understand them, but we do have to do more than just talk to them. We have to observe them. We have to watch for those unspoken signals so that we're not just waiting for the moment when, they're completely just emotionally a wreck from this situation. So for me, I would say checking in with them every once in a while is a great way of actually making sure that not only one, you're staying on top of the situation, but two, letting them know that you really care and that you're really there for them. Again, always gaining feedback from them, because if they seem annoyed, then we really don't want to break that communication bond with them. So we have to respect them and respect their personal time as well. but letting them know that, hey, I'm here for you. I really want to build our relationship. Now that we have time here. Maybe your teenager is at a point where they're learning to drive. Maybe this would be a perfect time to say, you know what, how about if we took a couple laps around the neighborhood and, everybody grabs their mask, everybody grabs their gloves, and now we're spending some quality time. We're laughing about it. We're sharing in something that they enjoy. So trying to find things that they enjoy, whether it's a hobby, making a puzzle, watching a movie, something that they actually enjoy, not that we enjoy, but that actually is of interest to them, and then making it an interest to you so that they can start to see that you're actually trying to connect at their level would actually be a great way. And that doesn't necessarily require communication, but it is another form of communication. Right. And so I think this time is a great time for family time to really start actually showing that interest so that we get a little bit outside of ourselves and actually become part of somebody else that's important to us.
Right. And I do imagine that it's more difficult for parents with autistic children or children with learning disabilities or behavioral, disorders and things of that nature. But tell me more about any specific cases that maybe you've encountered recently, with these type of reactions that perhaps you've seen.
Yes. I've actually had a couple cases here in the office, and you're right, with children of special needs, it does get a little bit more difficult because although all of us are creatures of habit and routine, with children of special needs, they actually require a little bit more routine and structure. And so when you break that structure and that routine for them, it actually augments their frustration and their inability to function. So that is an actual paramount focus for the parent, is trying to reestablish some sort of routine and structure for them. I actually have a 9-year-old child who is autistic, and the grandmother brought him in not too long ago, and he had been having some episodes of increased agitation, couldn't sit still, and actually vomiting. And he tends to vomit when he gets very anxious, and he'll just start to feed himself very quickly, and he'll basically force himself to vomit because of just overfeeding in a short amount of time. And so the grandmother has learned to, catch this behavior as it's happening and actually stop him and say, slow down, let's calm down. Everything is okay. So just giving him a little bit of reassurance and actually having him slow down and using that tone to just help him kind of bring his anxiety level down has helped him some in his home. I have another child who's 6 years old and has demonstrated aggression in her sleep. And so the mom contacted me and was very concerned because she says during the day she's very clingy, but yet at night she's actually like punching and kicking and grabbing my hair and pulling my hair. And so children are going to express these frustrations and these fears in many ways. And so for her, we talked about, actually talking to her during the day and asking her, are you worried that mommy and daddy and our family, that something's going to happen, and see where she goes with that. And then trying to reassure her. And we talked about setting up a bedtime routine that would help soothe her. So something like taking a calm bath and then maybe reading a book together, something that just is completely outside of what we're going through right now. I think too many of us, it's the constant news, it's the constant talk of the COVID. And sometimes we forget that our kids are around and they're listening. And so they're thinking, oh my gosh, my parents don't have a job. Oh my gosh, where are we going to live? Oh my gosh. And so the kids are internalizing all of these concerns. And before you know it, not only are their routines interrupted, but now you've added to a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old the concern of, are we going to still have a home? What's going to happen to my family? And so we sometimes don't think about these things, but kids are actually thinking these situations.
Right.
They don't know how to express it.
Yeah, I mean, these are grown-up problems, and
Right.
not to mention the amount of people that are consumed, right, by the coronavirus topic at large, where I have family members that they nonstop are sending me things on text message, right? On social media, they're sending videos, conspiracy theories, and all these kind of things where I've had to tell a few family members, which I won't mention, which ones, but I said to them, look, I already tuned out. I tuned out from the extent of obsession. I want to know what's going on, but I'm not going to partake in a full life immersion into every detail of it, because some things are not even true. Some things are not even real, right? So you can't consume yourself, the whole thing. So imagine if you're doing that in that household with, with those kids. So the big takeaway for me with this conversation with you, that us, putting aside the physical medical part, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, but really the emotional and the mental aspect is huge. Absolutely. So this virus has really affected everyone in multiple ways, because most people will never have the virus, but it did affect their household, and it did affect the minds and the little hearts, like other kids and stuff. So I mean, wow. But if a child becomes infected, what's your advice? If they were to actually contract the virus.
If a child contracts the virus, we would expect them to still follow the recommendations for the CDC guidelines. We would expect them to still be in quarantine for the appropriate amount of time, which is still the 14 days. Obviously, there needs to be extra cleanliness in the home in terms of wiping down surfaces. Depending on the age of the child, that child may require an adult to be in quarantine with them. It's hard to quarantine a child, really, because an adult, you can reason with them and explain to them, you're going to have to stay in this room for 14 days and we will bring everything to you, but you have to stay here. With a child, it's a little bit harder. So it's going to probably require that an adult be in that room with them. And so, of course, you're now talking about more exposure to the family if that adult wasn't in fact, the person who gave the child the infection. But wearing the masks at all times during the times that they're in contact with other family members, wearing gloves when they're at home if they're going to be in contact with other family members, making sure that they're using one bathroom and preferably only they use that one bathroom. But other than that, it's really a lot of supportive care and symptom care. So depending on the symptoms that they're having, if they're having fever, obviously you're going to treat the fever with some sort of antipyretic. If you're going to have, if they're having cough, then of course, as the symptoms worsen, then you want to make sure you're in contact with your pediatrician, or if it's really severe, then obviously you're going to take them straight to the emergency room to make sure that they're getting the appropriate care that they need. But you would still follow the same guidelines that the CDC provides for even the adults.
So basically, as always, don't panic. Follow the steps. Become educated, right?
Absolutely.
Become educated. Don't go into the conspiracy theories and believe every article. No. Go directly to the CDC, to your own physician. And just be smart about it with your kids.
Absolutely. There's still, this virus is still very new. There's still a lot of investigational studies out there, whether it's in terms of just knowing what the virus is all about and what the treatments are going to be finally, if there's going to be a vaccine and when that vaccine is going to be available. Everything is still very up in the air. And so you have to just try to find reliable sources. And that's something that parents can also help their children, especially the teenagers, with, is actually allocating those reliable sources in the internet that are going to give them the right information. so that they're not following all these conspiracy theories and all these, websites that are or pages that are just giving misinformation. And
Right.
so you actually need to be informed by proper sites, by proper agencies, so that we don't panic, because panic only leads to more frustration, more anxiety. And at the end of the day, it helps nobody.
Right. Well, doctor, I got to tell you, we do appreciate you. We appreciate you, taking the time to help us navigate this unfortunate, time in world history, actually.
Yes.
So thank you very much for being, my guest today, our guest at Best Doctors Insurance. And, hopefully we have another podcast episode with a different topic, a little more positive topic in a more positive time.
Thank you so much for having me, Willie. It was a pleasure spending some time with you and sharing some of my thoughts with you. And I look forward to another podcast on, a more positive note.
Absolutely. Likewise. Can't wait. So our friends, that is our time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the official BDI podcast, el programa oficial de Best Doctors Insurance. Tune in every single week for a new episode. Even though we're in quarantine right now, we will continue. Connect with us anytime on social media and on our website at bestdoctorsinsurance.com. Have a great day. And even though you're in quarantine, do not text and drive.